Fearful Symmetry Fridays. This week I'm looking at The Refiner in Fire. I believe that's chapter 8, section 5. And we're talking about the fallen world. So Northrop Frye goes on to say, "The fallen world," Blake says, "began in a completely lifeless state of fire and rock and water. Life and consciousness have since evolved in it. Where have they come from? We may see a plant grow out of a rock, but no one would be naive enough to say that the plant was a part of the rock that had come to life, except perhaps at a distance of a sufficiently bewildering number of eons in the past. And if death could produce life, even the dead world had existence, and where did its existence come from? Perhaps from non-existence, for we are often told that God made the world from nothing, though the product of nothing and anything is still nothing." Now, I just want to interject a little side note. This reminds me of something Jordan Peterson talks about in Genesis about the, what's it called? The chaos, tohu wabohu, something like that. I'm probably butchering it. But there seemed to be, formlessness and chaos at the beginning. And then God, the creator, comes and doesn't actually create, but he orders. And this in turn is reminiscent of Blake's God, his Old Testament figure, Urizen, which I believe might get mentioned in this reading. But anyway, it's worth noting that if you're following along and you're interested in Blake, that Blake's Urizen is sort of the Old Testament Jehovah in some sense, as someone who is ordering the universe, not necessarily creating it from ex nihilo, from nothing. So I'll continue the reading. "But surely it is simpler to assume that what happened in the Azoic world was what still happens every spring, and that life came out of it because it had been previously buried in it. Now when a germ of life grows, it recreates its original form. If there were no original form of an oak tree, the acorn would not know what to do. Similarly, the original form of the germ of life that grew out of the world long ago is most clearly indicated by the most mature and full-grown forms of life that now exist in the world, that is, human societies. The notion, Blake says, that before the creation all was solitude and chaos is, quote, the most pernicious idea that can enter the mind. If we make a stand on chaos as a beginning, ignoring the question of where it came from, and deny the analogy between the growth of life out of it and the growth of a plant from a seed, then we are at a loss to explain why there should be a direction of development, and why life should take on more and more highly organized forms. The solitary God of Orthodox theology is far greater nonsense than this. One can see why a deist, unable to conceive of creation except as an arbitrary starting point of linear time, should use such a God as his breech block. But there is no excuse for those who call themselves believers in Jesus. In Jesus, God and man are one, and if the Son of God existed in eternity, God must have been human from the beginning. A pre-human God is the most meaningless idol ever worshipped, and if always human, God must have been plural, for it is not good for either God or man to be alone. Thus, if there is a creative principle which the evolution of life and consciousness is now recreating, it must have been a human society, dwelling in what are now the two forms of existence which we are striving to reestablish, a city and a garden." At this point, the Berkeleyan, quote, "to be is to be perceived," parenthetically, by man, end quote, and the orthodox, quote, "to be is to have been created by God," end quote, become the same axiom, as even Berkeley did not wholly see. Our present human society, then, has evolved out of a seed of life dropped into a dead world from a preceding eternal human society, and we cannot ask where the eternal society in its turn came from, because that is pushing the idea of time further than it will go. If we study this image more carefully, we can see that the seed of life was the dead world, fallen from eternity, and that the seed will have achieved its original form when the dead world, including the sun and stars, becomes again a city and a garden. The achievement of a permanent human civilization and culture is the next stage in development, and if that is not the end, we shall see what the end is more clearly from there. That's all I'm going to read from Fearful Symmetry this week. Again, this is a crazy week with the holidays. I have very little time, but I'm trying to fit this in when I can. So if you like this sort of thing, please give the video a like and subscribe. Thank you.